everyone! Today I'm going to talk about the third teaser trailer of Amazon's Rings of Power that just came out from a few days ago. There's been another trailer that was revealed in the San Diego Comic-Con. I'll do a separate video analyzing that trailer, but in this specific video I'll go over the third teaser trailer and not the one that just came out. There's been quite a lot to talk about with this particular show. Unfortunately, most of what is seen in the third teaser trailer, as well as the latest Comic-Con trailer, and the information coming from recent leaks and articles, casts the show and the showrunners in a negative light. My video will contain major spoilers, so I'd like to suggest to anyone who may want to avoid spoilers to not watch the video, considering I'll go over some of the major leaks that just came out recently. I haven't been this hyped since the anticipation for the last season of Game of Thrones, which unfortunately ended up disappointing most of the audiences due to its controversial ending, as well as the overall deteriorating quality of that final season compared to past seasons, which garnered worldwide praise and were regarded as a new threshold for TV production and adaptations of fantasy stories. We all remember what happened and how the final episodes were received and the backlash that came right after that, which lasted for months and months on social media and in various forums. I talked about some of these aspects in my previous video about the Jon Snow sequel, so if you want to go and watch, I'll leave the link here for anyone who may be interested in hearing about the new Game of Thrones sequel in development. Despite the lack of current great adaptations of fantasy books, like the latest subpar adaptation of the Wheel of Time book series by Amazon and the mediocre adaptation of the Witcher books by Netflix, at least in my opinion, I was still extremely excited as a fan of the Peter Jackson's movie trilogy from 20 years ago, which I regard as the best movies of all time, as well as being a fan of The Lord of the Rings in general as a story and as a mythology. Now, having said all of that, since then many leaks about the story as well as articles and photos of the cast have come out, including major spoilers about some of the major characters and events on the show. The fans' biggest worries and hesitation ended up being very mild compared to what it should have been, considering what we are now seeing as the end result based on the few teaser trailers that were released. The leaks and spoilers are far worse than what we could have imagined. The production value seems considerably lower than what was expected. The casting is uninspiring. The costumes are cheap and look out of low-budget TV shows from decades ago. The story is coming directly out of fanfiction.com based on the alleged leaks. The visuals are not Tolkienian, which means it looks like a generic fantasy and not a proper and authentic adaptation of Tolkien's works as he had imagined and intended. The main characters like Galadriel, Celebrimbor, Tarmiriel, Elrond and others all look to be mishandled and distorted. The biggest issue that I personally have is with Galadriel's character, which is based on a very feminine archetype of a female sorceress, who ended up being transformed on the show into a second-rate version of Brienne of Tarth, or Joan of Arc, going by the trailers, leaks and pictures released so far. Recent leaks have confirmed our worst fears, that this show is going to disrespect Tolkien's creation, disrespect his legacy, and openly distort it without any consideration to the source material, to the professor, or his son Christopher, who was the biggest gatekeeper of his father's work and perhaps among the greatest guardians and shepherds in literature. Now in today's video I'm going to do a breakdown of the teaser trailer. I'll also do an additional video later on to cover the biggest moments from the San Diego Comic-Con trailer and from the Q&A panels with the showrunners and actors. But in this video, I'll talk about the latest major spoiler that was released by Gary from Nerdrotic about the identity of Sauron on the show. So I'd like to warn in advance about the alleged major spoilers and leaks that will be discussed in this video. We start with a shot of what appears to be Numenor and the Numenorian ship. While it's all CGI, the shot itself is decent. In the background we hear the voice of Galadriel talking about the world in its younger stages, which seems to refer to the time of the trees of Valinor and the First Age. Then we get a shot of Galadriel's face looking at something which appears to be the true trees of Valinor, Laurelin and Telperion, before their destruction by Morgoth and Ungoliant in the First Age, thousands of years before the show's assumed timeline. Most likely this is a wide shot of Tirion, the largest elven settlement that is located in the pass through the Pelori Mountains in the continent of Aman, leading to Valinor, where the godly beings the Valar reside. This is most likely a part of the prologue that seems to be narrated by Galadriel, which parallels the movie trilogy's narration of the prologue by the wonderful Cate Blanchett. We then get some wide shots of the beautiful scenery of New Zealand, with a singer in the background singing a song that I assume is going to be part of the soundtrack. Then we hear a voice of one of the female Harfoots that will play a part on the show. Her accent is supposed to be Irish, however the actress does a rather poor job with it, but the biggest problem here is that the Harfoots are not based on the Irish people. They are a third group of hobbits in the Third Age that are based, like the other two groups, on the Anglo-Saxons of the Middle Ages as well as the 19th century of England. The accent should be English. The hobbits are based on the Anglo-Saxons in England visually and culturally.
I'll tell you about Elijah. I mean, we were convinced that Frodo was going to be an English actor because we wanted the hobbits to basically be English as Tolkien really wrote them.
The female Harfoot mentions the elves who protect their forests, as we are shown a shot from Tirion, most likely from the prologue. The narration and the image, however, do not match. The elves were not confined to the forests. The elves had cities just like the men. They had grand cities in the First and Second Age on hills, mountainsides, and plains. This line alone shows the lack of care for the source material by the showrunners. It's a poorly written line of dialogue. In the next shot, we see the dwarves protecting their mines as well as the first images of the mines of Moria in its heyday in the Second Age. I'm not sure if I like the show's version of Moria. There's too much light, waterfalls, and greenery. The female Harfoot ends up mentioning the men who care for their fields, and we see a shot of a human settlement with farmers working in the fields. This may be the village of the new original character Bronwyn. The female Harfoot then mentions how the Harfoots only have each other, as we see a shot of Nori who is signaling for the other Harfoots to move forward. Based on previous information, it seems like they are trying to move between places without being seen by other people. In this story, the Harfoots are nomads. In the next shot, we see a group of Harfoots dancing together in their weird type of costumes, probably trying to disguise themselves as much as possible with their surroundings as they move from place to place. Just to remind the viewers, they are not supposed to be the ancestors of the hobbits. They are simply hobbits in canon, but they are not supposed to be multi-ethnical in their appearance. They are not supposed to look like that or have this type of culture. They are supposed to exist in the Third Age only, as one of the three major groups of the hobbits. This whole part of the Harfoots goes against Tolkien's lore. The female Harfoot then claims that there's nothing to worry about, that they are safe. Then Nori sees a comet passes by. Then we move to a scene between Galadriel and Elrond, who asks her to stop fighting and pursuing her goal after the same waterfall shot from previous teaser in what I assume is a journey through the snowy mountains, perhaps the same one we've seen in previous trailers. They are climbing the mountains together and reach the peak at some point. I assume these scenes happen in the first episode before her own unique journey in the Sundering Seas that is supposed to happen during the first two episodes alongside Halbrand, a new original character. I'm going to talk about Halbrand in just a moment. However, it could be a separate mission of her and Elrond together that has nothing to do with previous canonical events. In the next few shots, we see the elves walking in the midst of a storm in an icy plain. It may be the passing of the elves through Helcaraxe, which I assume will be part of the flashback in the prologue related to the First Age's events. However, it could easily be a separate mission. In the next scenes, Elrond continues to admonish her, to ask her, almost pleading her, to stop fighting, to give up her fight while she claims that her enemy is still out there. Obviously, she refers to Sauron, and she's going to be correct. This trailer, which is supposed to be done and thought about in great detail, establishes a sort of contentious close relationship between the two. He cares for her, but he doesn't believe her and her ability to complete her goals. That's the impression the viewers may get from watching these scenes. During their exchanges, we see some glimpses of other scenes that show Galadriel leading the group in the snow and in the cave, and then we get a shot of a city, which I assume is in Numenor, in one of the major port cities. And then we get a shot of Galadriel in the midst of an orange ash-like substance, as if everything is burning around her, and then we get a clear view of what seems to be perhaps a vision of the future of Numenor, or the destruction of a city, perhaps the destruction of Beleriand in the War of Wrath. Bodies are floating everywhere, and around them are the remains of a city below water with its upper part on fire. This could be a flashback of the past or a vision of the future. In canon, she does have a strong power of foresight and telepathy. These images are shown during the pivotal exchange between Galadriel and Elrond in this teaser trailer. In this exchange, Elrond tells her that it's over, but then she claims that he hasn't seen what she has seen. She repeats the same sentence twice. In canon, she never participated in any of the major wars or any of the wars in the First and Second Age. One of the major issues fans have with the show is the compression of the timeline. We have several events that are all happening at the same time, even though they shouldn't happen simultaneously, but hundreds of years and even thousands of years apart. Next, we see a Numenorian ship with a unique, apparently Eastern design with a CGI background. A shot of a big statue overlooking a Numenorian port and city. It transitions into a different setting, showing us Gil-galad and Elrond talking about an upcoming darkness. Thematically, the transition makes very little sense. Then a shot of the Amazons show's version of orcs, which in my opinion are too thin and human-like compared to the thicker and bigger versions of the Peter Jackson's movie trilogy. We get the same shot of the previous teaser, where we see the white birds flying past elven ships sailing in the sea with Galadriel on board. They watch the bright birds flying past. Now I can only assume it's a sign of the Valar. This may be our first sign of the Valar in action. We then see a shot of Tarmiriel, who is the Queen Regent of Numenor on the show, though technically she shouldn't be the queen, she should be married to the king, who is Ar-Pharazôn, her cousin. We then see Nori and another Harfoot looking at what I assume is the meteor's impact. We see a blurred shot of what should be the Meteor Man. However, based on the few leaks that we do have, he's supposed to be one of the wizards. Next, we see Elrond, who walks among the dwarves in Moria, with a few more shots of the dwarves themselves. Here we see Elrond climbing the mountain, which is probably part of the scene with Galadriel from previous teasers. And finally, we get our first clear shot of Halbrand, the human, who ends up being stranded in the sea on a raft, and the one who saves Galadriel and spends the first 2 episodes with her on that raft, as well as journeying with her and with Elendil back to Numenor. This character will develop some kind of a connection and grow closer to her and to Elendil during their turbulent journey. Now I'm going to enter some serious spoiler territory, and I would suggest you to not watch from here if you don't want to get heavily spoiled. Sauron's identity on the show got leaked recently by Gary from Nerdrotic. While not confirmed, the source of his information is legit. Based on Gary's information, Halbrand is in fact Sauron himself in disguise. That is, of course, directly taken from fanfiction. You wouldn't even believe that to be true. So Sauron, allegedly based on this yet unconfirmed information, somehow ends up on a raft, running away from his past based on previous information from articles. He saves Galadriel from the wreckage of her ship based on other leaks, and then they work together to survive the storm and are saved and taken by Elendil to Númenor? During their trip, they appeared to grow closer to one another. I almost hope that Gary got it wrong, because we will enter hardcore fanfiction territory, which is the worst thing they could have done with the show and its characters. That is, of course, just my opinion. Anyway, we then transition to a new theme in the trailer, which talks about the past. Arondir, the Sylvan elf, mentions how the past is with them as we see Galadriel ride to battle on a horse with Tarmiriel and with the Númenórean army, something that didn't happen in the source material. Nori and another Harfoot hug each other, and we see a lightning strike the raft and what appears to be Galadriel's figure thrown to the sea from the lightning impact on the raft in the midst of the raging storm. Shots of a Númenórean ship with Elendil and Galadriel toward a castle in the distance, while Elendil tells someone who appears to be Isildur that the past is dead and you either leave it behind or die with it. This was, of course, a direct message to the fans that expressed their anger at what they consider as the desecration of Tolkien's works by Amazon with this show. The whole part makes no sense considering it's not connected to any of the previous scenes in the trailer, so why would Amazon use a part of this trailer to talk about what the past means? What is the context? It appears like there's none. It's almost like it's out of spite for the fans. After this rather ridiculous part in the teaser trailer, we see Ar-Pharazôn inside the crowd of Númenórean citizens. Then someone who appears to be Halbrand grabs a spear as he rides on a horse while being chased by a Númenórean soldier. In the next shot we see Durin the Fourth, the future king of Moria, who is married to Disa. She's an original female dwarf on the show. We then see a group of elves who raise their swords in what appears to be Fëanor's oath from the prologue part of the first episode. In the next scene, we see a chained Arondir jumping above a beast, trying to attack him with a gravity-defying jump. I assume Adar, who is the evil elf that is aligned with Sauron, took him and another characters prisoners, and they are held by the orcs. The shot then transitions to Galadriel in action, as she ducks under a cave troll and hits it with her sword. And then we see another shot of the mysterious Meteor Man in the crater after the initial hit. We see what appears to be a hint of the Eye of Sauron, and then the fire is immediately absorbed. The trailer then ends with the Harfoots waddling on their way forward as they journey down the hill, with the background of a song that will most likely be a part of the soundtrack for the show. So, to conclude, the third teaser, though full of expensive-looking CGI-enhanced imagery, was an incoherent mess. There wasn't any thread of connection between its various parts. It wasn't clear what was the core story of the show. What is the threat? Who are the main protagonists and antagonists? What are the main themes? We were presented with randomly different scenes and images that had no connective tissue. The teaser was saturated with CGI, which to me at least looked overdone and fake-looking for the most part. The show isn't following the source material aside from general lines here and there, but most of it is original and expensive fanfiction loosely based on Tolkien's Legendarium and on the appendices of Return of the King. The cultural appropriation on this show, which is one of the major issues with the fans, is the least of this show's problems. What will make or break the show is the quality of the dialogue and the characterizations of the main protagonists and antagonists. From the teasers and the articles, as well as the leaks, the biggest problem arising from the show is its main protagonist, Galadriel, the Lady of Light, and one of the most powerful elves in Tolkien's legendarium, who is a completely different character on the show. It's her arc that I suspect that will bring the most criticism from the fans, as has been the case so far in many other comment sections. As a longtime fan of not only this property, but also of other fantasy stories and fantasy as a genre in general, the upcoming show veers toward an unexpected train crash, and it's truly disappointing how in 2022 we cannot get a production company to do a show that at the very least would try to properly adapt its source material authentically as well as respect it. This has got to be the worst time for adaptations in current Hollywood. Now, regardless of my criticism, I'll watch the show and review it fully. I expect to review a fanfiction, but at the very least I hope that it will be a well-produced fanfiction. What's certain is that it's not Tolkienian, and has almost nothing to do with Professor Tolkien's works. So just as a reminder, my next Rings of Power video will go over the latest trailer from the San Diego Comic-Con, as well as some of the latest information about the show and the production. In the coming months, I aim to review House of the Dragon, Rings of Power, as well as other TV shows, video games, and hopefully I'll be able to also discuss other topics. Now, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. Please comment below, subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you can get notified of my future uploads. And I'll see you soon.